How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew, this is Lemora's Cards, and today we're taking a look at the CCS Summer Showdown cEDH 10K. It's a cEDH event that took place this past weekend that I was in attendance for, and it was a lot of fun, and it had a really interesting top 16, and of course everybody there was asking me to cover it, so you know I had to. Was some little goofy technical stuff that went down, and we'll get into that, but this one I wanted to do a little bit differently because I was there, and I'm curious if you guys kind of like this formatting. So what I'd like to do, along with the meta breakdown at the beginning, kind of go over my experience at the event pretty briefly, and then along with the other decks we're going to be looking at, go over the deck that I played. A lot of people have asked me about Rograkh, and don't view this as a definitive Rograkh video, but I'll just kind of briefly go over the deck I played and some of the decisions behind it and how it felt. If you enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below which of these decks was your favorite. What do you think of this kind of formatting that I'm doing? Is this something you'd like to see going forward? And in general, what kind of content you'd like to see from me in the coming months? Thank you as always to my amazing patrons over on Patron, whose support helps me make lots of videos like this for you guys to enjoy, and they get awesome perks over there as well. And I think with all that being said, we can go ahead and hop into it. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product, get anything that you want really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. This is one of the best ways you can support the channel, and again, it's just free stuff. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. This video is brought to you by Beholder Gaming, who is throwing a cEDH 10K July 27th and 28th at Charlie's Collectible Show in Stone Mountain, Georgia. This event is fully proxy friendly, will be one of your last chances to earn points for the Top Deck Invitational, as well as the first platinum event in the Beholder Gaming Southeastern Circuit, an invitational circuit for players down here in the Southeast. I'll be attending this event, and I can't wait to see you there. It's going to be great. Find out more in the description below. So this was a 142 player event, and the popular decks aren't too surprising. What is surprising is that they didn't seem to do especially well for the most part. Tymna Kraum #1 with 17 entries, not surprising at all, more than 10% of the field, but only 2 top 16s for an 11% conversion rate. 10 CCS showed up. I saw a bunch of CCS, and not one of them made it out. 3 Kenriths did do it, so Kenrith showing up here. Tivit pretty popular, and then some 5s and 4s. We've got Magdas and Kennons, Rograkh with 4, Dargo Thras, Najeela not especially popular. For the most part, our tops are kind of spread out across different decks, which is pretty cool to see, and a pretty decent variety here. In terms of my experience of the tournament, it's pretty sick. This is my 4th or 5th time out at CCS. It's a great venue, tons of room for these kind of stuff. They could do much bigger events there if they really, really wanted to. The event ran really smoothly until top 16, where when we get to the first deck, I'll talk about that. But I had a lot of fun. There was a pretty diverse meta game. I played against lots of different decks. Overall, I thought it was a great event. So this is the deck that I played, Sci-Fi Wasabi Rograkh, with a lot of changes going into MH3. So, and I went into this weekend basically saying if I wanted to win, I would play Rog Sci with just Necrodom and Flare of Duplication added in. But then my goal really was to figure out this deck post MH3 because I think this is an incredibly powerful deck. It already was, and I think it got some buffs. And I want to just stress test it and figure out what exactly we're doing. So I made a lot of changes. So because I haven't explained this deck too much, I'll go over the basics of it, but it's basically infinite mana the deck. We try to win by breaking the fact we have 2 cheap commanders in the zone to make cards like Relic of Legends and Gaia's Cradle a lot more powerful, and then we use Thrasios as an outlet to use our infinite mana to draw our deck and win the game with something like a Finale of Devastation or an Eternal Witness Lightning Bolt loop, something like that. The combos that we have access to are cards like Kinnan and Basalt Monolith, Devoted Druid and Machine God's Effigy. We can use Dockside Extortionist with Cloudstone Curio, and we can also use Cloud of Fairies with Cloudstone Curio if we have a Gaia's Cradle in play that taps for enough mana. Also, you'll see this deck tend to run something like Baron, Master Wizard, or Temur Sabertooth to go infinite with Dockside. I tested not having either of those for this event, and you can also win with Hullbreaker Horror if you're on that. With just Hullbreaker Horror and any mana positive rock, you can go infinite with Rograkh. There's lots of staple-y creatures. We don't run a lot of Dorks because they're not that great into Bowmasters, but we have, again, lots of mana accelerants and generically good cards. Gilded Drake, whose stocks are pretty high up, and some people might even run the other Volatile Stormbreak as well. Dosin, which not everyone is on because it's a scary card, but it's just so powerful to be able to slam a creature that people can't do anything with. Lots of different tutor targets. 6 was a new addition who was very strong as a value engine. Doesn't have a combo in this deck as it's currently constructed. You could add something like Life from the Loam to do that, but I don't think we really want to do that. And 6 is just pretty great at helping you find your land drops and turn extra lands into permanents from your yard. And then new test slots for me were Seedborn Muse and Consecrated Sphinx, both of which were were fantastic. I have currently a 100% win rate with Seaborn Muse hitting the table. I have not lost a game where this thing has gone into play. I think that's the same with Consphinx, but I've seen that one a lot less. Seaborn Muse, I can prioritize decently early because we net so much mana that doing like Finale for 7 isn't unbelievable out of like turn 2 on this deck, or maybe turn 3, or just like turn 1, you know, Imp Recruiter 4, turn 2 Seaborn Muse, something along those lines that we're able to do. Again, because we're kind of the big mana deck. It's kind of the strength of us. Notes for the cards I played here. I don't think I want Spirit Guide, and I might add Baron back. Oh, also for my record, so kind of a heartbreaker. I went in, immediately got 2 wins, and then I just struggled to win from the rest of the day. Honestly, think I went in with too little sleep, which you could label an excuse, but I am at fault for it. So is it an excuse? I'm taking the blame. It's my fault. But I do kind of feel like if I had just went in with like an extra hour or 2 of sleep the later rounds, I would have picked up a win. The deck didn't underperform, although there are some changes I want to make. Sorceries, I tried adding Wheel Windfall. The double wheels have actually been really good. We use our yard a little bit more with Shifting Woodland and 6. Trying out Gamble, I think it's fine. Sometimes we do go kind of low on cards and it's not that great, but everybody, I mean, you know, Gamble to hand is just like, you got 3 cards in hand. It's still favorable to keep the card that you tutor for. Like, you know, sometimes you want to risk it. And again, another slot I'm testing, and then a bunch of tutors to get mostly our win conditions. Interaction, I went slightly higher this weekend because I added the 2 flares in. I went down to Red Blast, like kept in like Fierce Force. I went up Force Negation because I was tired of losing like turn 2-ish to Rock Size and TNKs. So ended up interaction this weekend. I don't think I want any more, and I might actually remove a piece. So I'm not really sure which piece is the most cuttable. It might be something like Swan Song. I'm not really sure. Archsteward's Charm is kind of iffy. It's there to mainly put Cradle into play, but you can also just search for a creature, put it in hand. I've used all the modes on it so far. The other 2, the Bite Spell and the Artifact Enchantment Removal, don't come out nearly that often. I don't know, it's not that most efficient for what it does. Candelabra doesn't have a combo with it, although you can combo with like Hullbreaker Horror with it. That's something I've done a few times. It's mainly just there to break our Gaia's Cradle, which we prioritize getting, as you can see with the card like Expedition Map. Sowing Mica Spawn is probably a card coming into my list because I want to be able to get that effect, and it's basically the same rate, if not better than Expedition Map, although Map has a nice utility of, there's been a decent amount of games where I play the map and pass and hold up the ability to go get Sage or Auto Water, so that comes up. Grim Monolith, I was mainly trying because I picked up a Japanese copy of it and wanted to play it, but also I did like being able to power out early Tezzerets and Seaborn Muses and Consphinxes, and I found that having the extra colorless around made it a little bit easier for me to not have to use my pips on some other things, on like bigger combo turns where you might want to try to play like Cannon and Thrasios in the same turn. And then Cloudstone. Relic is like the secret goat of this deck. A lot of times people are terrified you're going to play Dockside Extortionist, and then you cast Relic of Legends, which is basically Dockside mana. A lot of games you'll go turn 1 Rog and Thras. Turn 2, your Relic of Legends makes 3 mana. It was neutral and it mana fixed for you potentially. It's really, really good and allows you to sequence your combo lines, where I had a game where I played a Dosin. Dosin cost 3 mana, but he netted 1 mana, so really he only cost 2 mana. And then when I got Kinnan, it made the Relic tap for 1 more, and Kinnan itself tapped for mana. So as you're going through these kind of expensive combo lines, especially if you're doing like creature tutors, you know, like Imp Recruiter for this, Spellseeker for that, it can help you net mana as you go along and make them ultimately cheaper lines than they really are. Enchantments, I will be running Earthcraft again. I think it is just really good. I noted a lack of mana acceleration through the events. I might also go back up on Utopia Sprawl because it is a little bit better once you have the Earthcraft. Fertile Ground is also a consideration. I'm not sure which I like better. I talked to Sam Black this weekend and they were saying they think it's pretty close. And I just got to talk a lot about the deck and cards and slots and what we think of certain things. And that was just really nice. And then my mana base, because it wasn't running Earthcraft, because I was trying to see if basically some of the other Rog Thras pilots were correct in saying that it's like cope and it's not worth it, I just decided to go as greedy as I could with the mana base. And I didn't think it really did a lot. Shifting Woodland, I think came in untapped every game, but also I've yet to have to activate this card. It's been there. It's been ready to help me, but I've yet to need it. So I don't know if I will. Talongates of Madara is another card I might be considering. If you're interested in a full Rog Thras video, I might do that because this is a lot of fun just talking through the list. And I have lots and lots of thoughts on the deck, but this isn't a Rog Thras video. So I am going to move on, unfortunately. So what was the shenanigans with this tournament I was talking about? Well, they pretty much did everything wrong for the top 16. what went down was that the tops, we did 7 rounds day 1, which also kind of sucked, but I get why they did it. And then we cut to top 16 day 2. All that went normal. Top 16 happens, and the event transpires with the kind of incorrect information that top 16 games are allowed to draw and replay. This is not something you can do now. I think for platinum events, from what I've heard, that was always the case. And for other events, it's recently become the case post Punt City 3, I believe. You might have to, I don't know, don't quote me on all the rules, but I have heard definitively they were not supposed to do this. If a draw occurs in a top 16 game, the person with the highest seeding moves on. So basically, if one of those had happened, then that would mean there's one wrong person in the top 4, right? But it wasn't just one of those that happened. Every single pod drew at least once, and one of the pods drew twice. So for top 16, instead of 4 games of Magic happening, we had 9 games, so 2 from 3 of the pods for 6. And then the third pod played like 6 hours. They played 3 games. So there were 9 top 16 games plus the top 4, which didn't even get played. And a winner was picked who wasn't even the highest seeding because the prize split that was done. Honestly, this entire top 16 and the rankings for it are basically nonsense and incorrect. None of it was done correctly. And then the people who did make it to top 4 didn't even play, and the winner wasn't even top seeding. So how much stock you want to put into the order of these decks, I don't know, but all of these decks did earn their place into top 16. So I wouldn't really think of these in terms of like who got the best placement, because a lot of it is just straight up wrong, but it was still a big event. These are the decks that top 16'd, and these are the ones I'm going to cover. So I don't know, keep that in mind. Welcome to TopDeck.gg, your community's home for everything competitive Magic has to offer. Whether you're hosting an event, playing for a huge prize, or trying to advertise your store to thousands of players, we've got you covered. Using intuitive pairing software, playing Magic is a breeze. All your players have to do is sign up online, then scan the QR code in store. Give your competitors the gift of perfect information as their bracket updates in real time. Then, when the match is decided, our self-reporting software saves you time and leaves paper match slips in the past. Leave the heavy lifting to us so your community can sit back, relax, and have a great day of playing Magic. First up, we got Malcolm Vial Smasher. This is a deck I talked about recently in the last video. This one looking like it's leaning slightly less big reanimator-y. That last one had like Niv Mizzet. It had kind of less pirate synergistic cards. Like here we see Lightning Rig Crew, the new Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, Siren Storm Tamer. These are the kind of cards you see in the deck that leans when you are leaning a little bit more into the pirate Malcolm-y stuff. We see Kite Sail Arsonist as well, which I just really like this card still in cEDH. I still have yet to cast it, but whenever I see it, it just seems so good. Bellskite, which is great for protecting our creature combos. The Braids here, which I think is kind of stapley for these kind of Malcolm decks so far. It's really cool because I think the first time we saw this was in the Japanese builds, and then now we are seeing it more and more. Of course, the Glinthorn Buccaneer. Op Agent, usually a sign things are trending less turbo-y, but sorceries, kind of a bunch of staples. We do have the Reanimate, which I, again, don't think you need a big target or to run Entomb for Reanimate to be good in a deck that is trying to, in a lot of cases, just play Glinthorn Buccaneer. Also, my dockside got Force of Will, or somebody else's did. Reanimate is just a powerful enough card right now. Interaction, we also are on the Entomb. So again, no big target, but got Entomb Reanimate. You can do some good things. It lines up well with the Underworld Breach. It is slightly more efficient than casting the Glinthorn Buccaneer. Can also spread it across 2 turns, right? Where I go Instep Entomb, untap Reanimate. That can be really nice if you're wanting to hold up interaction, like you got an Underground Sea untapped, you're holding up, potentially your Offer You Can't Refuse, which is a card I kind of hate, but maybe your Flusterstorm. Because I play with this player and I know they played relatively safe in the games that I saw. And other notable cards we got the Limdual's Vault, which doesn't always show up, but in these kind of Grixis piles can. Fire Covenant, similarly. We didn't see a Toxic Deluge. In this deck especially, you got all these little pirates lying around. You don't want a Deluge because Malcolm is never surviving it. So I like Fire Covenant much better. Also the instant speed ability of it, really nice. Kind of normal-ish interaction package. And then we do have the Ad Nauseam. Artifacts, bunch of mana. We have the Conqueror's Flail, no defense grid. That is a sign, I'm not going to say of a coward, of a conservative player. And you have like a decent amount of creatures to just throw this thing on. I still like Flail even in like Rog side. It's still a playable card, but I'm a defense grid jammer. And then we are on the One Ring. Enchantments, the good stuff ones, right? No Necrodominance here. Necropotence, Rhystic Mystic. Don't believe we saw a single MH3 card running Thundering Falls as well as Undercity Sewers. Running 2 of the Surveillance, which is a little bit higher than we usually see. Yeah, looks like a good clean list. Malcolm Vial, a deck that my assessments have kind of gone up for. I just kind of like the ability to be flexible. I think when you're all in turbo, it loses a bit. You get to do the Grixis stuff, and then you also just have a dumb creature combo that people probably struggle to interact with. So love to see it. We've got Kenrith, one of a few here in top 16, and let's see what kind of build we're looking at. So we've got a whole bunch of dorks. We've got some generic-ish value creatures, your Archivists, your Lothos. In this deck, you can usually look at Kennen as something like that. It can do combo-y stuff, but whatever. We've got some combo-y cards or even value-y cards that have become more standard in the deck. Agatha the Vile Cauldron isn't absurd to see at this point. When you have it buffed up enough, it can make your loops a lot easier. It can make using Kenrith as an actual engine better. For the most part, it's there to overlap with what Kenrith wants to do. Got like the Fimage, Mayhem Devil, Emil kind of stuff to go with Dockside, where we have different ways to loop it. We can kill our own Dockside and bring it back with Kenrith. We can Fimage it, plus put a counter on it with Kenrith to kill that. And then we've got some new cards that do that same thing, where we got Warren Soul Trader, which can sacrifice our Dockside, make a treasure, and then activate Kenrith, bring back the Dockside, and loop that way. It's going to make up for the life that we lose if we're able to loop enough. And like if we're able to net mana, we'll be able to gain ourselves 5 life, and so we won't actually lose anything. It kind of slots in relatively freely over Skirk Prospector because this isn't necessarily a turbo Dockside loop combo deck like a Korvold can be. You also don't have that many goblins lying around compared to a deck like that, and also the ability to mana fix is bigger in a 5-color deck that can already potentially struggle to use its mana. And then another new card we have is Evolution Witness, which is 2 and a green. It has 1 and a green adapt 2. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on it, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Who can put +1/+1 counters on creatures of mine? So yeah, we can do some goofy stuff with Kenrith and Evolution Witness because we can continually buy back a permanent from the yard by using mana that we net to put a counter on Evolution Witness, because it doesn't matter where the counter comes from. You know, it's built to trigger off its own adapt, but if you use Kenrith to put a counter on it, that will also work. By default, Kenrith is 1 and a green. And then, so we can do a Dockside loop, although most of those we could do anyways, but maybe this could be cheaper because Kenrith is 5 to activate, and we could potentially do this for 4 mana by putting a counter and then just casting the Dockside if we're able to loop it with like a Mayhem Devil. I think we can also just do LED, basically use this like a Bomberman where we, crack LED for 3, use 2, put counter on Evolution Witness, buy back the LED, play the LED, use it to net infinite green, and then we can filter that into infinite of all of our colors, if I'm thinking right. Another card that has shown up in some Kenrith decks and other big piles that, want to break the mid-range game is a Tali. Tali plus Kitten basically wins the game. Not guaranteed, but I've only seen it fail once. And that was me winning on top of it, I think. Talion is a nice mid-range engine. But yeah, Kenriths are not, for a 5-color good stuff deck, they're not as stapley in terms of like the creature package as you might think. There is a lot of build diversity with Kenrith, and we might see that as we go through the rest of the deck. Sorceries, tutors, Savine's direct to buyback stuff, and to do probably our intuition line. Instants. So we do have the Entomb. We're a reanimator combo deck. It makes sense. Looks like Path over Swords. I've been one to say that Path might be better against the average deck because no one runs basics, and so it basically has no downside. Especially when you like Swords and Orc Army or something like that, you could potentially give the Nas player like 20, 30 life, which can come up. And Path to Exile, I think the downside of it doesn't come up that often. Abrupt Decay is showing up. Eladamri's Call, MBT are on the Intuition. No ad nauseum. Don't expect to see it in a deck with this many 4s and a 7. Artifacts. We are on the Ring. Wish Claw, nothing else really standing out. We're a Survival of the Fittest deck and a Smothering Tide deck. Okay. And you see, of course, Rhystic, Mystic, Underworld Breach. And then 29 lands, a little bit on the higher side. We got the Gaia's Cradle. Going as deep as Tarnished Citadel to fix our mana here. Not too bad. We're not a Nas deck. Our life total won't get pressured that much. Decent amount of new cards showing up here. I think Kenrith got some pretty decent upgrades here. Again, because for a 5-color deck, it actually does have more of a synergistic kind of thing it can try to do versus decks like Tymna Kraum that like we don't ever really get a card that's like, oh wow, this is so good with Kraum. Or we got some Tymna cards, and for the most part, the community has moved past valuing those especially highly unless they're super efficient. Decks like Kenrith getting some new toys. We've got Clayton, a super cool guy I got to talk to and play with, rocking Krark Sakashima. These were the ones that he had there. They look ridiculous. Krark Sakashima, another deck, they got some new toys. Let's take a look. So we got the Volatile Storm Drake showing up, over Gilded Drake potentially. Is nice to be able to hit some kind of hate piece like I've talked about with this card. It has some flexibility over it. I'm not sure if they found it was better or they just played it because it was cheaper or because it looks cooler, because it definitely does. But there's reasons to play it even for power things and assessment. In this deck, I'm not sure you would want both. Maybe. Lots of their stapley kind of cards. So they are on Dualcaster Mage. New big one for the deck has been Ashling Flame Dancer. Maybe by the time this comes out, we'll have talked about this on the podcast, but it's a pretty sick card if you're casting in lots of instants and sorceries. The notable thing you might miss on it is it's similar to Nissa and not exactly templated like Omnath, where when you cast an instant or sorcery, you always get the discard a card, draw a card. So you always get that rummaging. And then if you've done it, if it's like your second or third time, then you get the other things on top of that effect. Also, you can reset this with Displacer Kitten, is a pretty powerful synergy. If you get this with Displacer Kitten and you're able to cast an instant or sorcery or something, you're probably going to win. You're just going to be able to like kill the table and make tons of mana, resetting it whenever you want. And again, drawing discard every single time to be able to rummage through, get rid of those lands and stuff, find more cheap instants and sorceries, go crazy with Krark. I think Krark's kind of hot right now. And then Pinnacle Monk, which is pretty free, just a red land on the back, and it just enters in, gets you back an instant or sorcery from the graveyard. Sorceries, we got In the Festivities, which is really nice against those creature heavy decks. Some Cantripy effects, Get Pro being like, one of the more notable ones. We are on the Twin Flame and the Molten Duplication, so we do have combos with Dualcaster Mage. This, I believe, is Grape Shot. Yes, Grape Shot. Finale of Promise, super hot card in the deck. Jessica's Will, one of the most busted cards with Krark. Instance, you're going to see lots of free stuff. So first up, we got the Galvanic Discharge. People said I was crazy for saying people would play this card. This is like such an immediate like potential upgrade for Krark. You immediately, if you do this and you win the Krark flip, you can immediately take advantage of the fact that it's a scalable bolt where I can do 0.1 at that, 0.5 at that. It doesn't take much for this card to have upside against something like Lightning Bolt. We are on both. We've got Stifle showing up here. Okay. Mystical Gut Shot. Flare of Duplication, a nice new option. Not too likely to see Flare of Denial because they don't run a ton of blue creatures. Like Sakashima is so very rarely entering as a 3-1. When it does, things have gone horribly wrong. Submerge, MBT. So not getting a lot of new stuff in the instance. Artifacts. Lots of ways to make mana, senseis to kind of filter through your deck. Relic of Legends, busted card. I keep telling y'all. The Thumb showing up here and the One Ring. Enchantments, we do see the Power Balance. This is one of the decks I think I really like Power Balance in. It can also, if it flips an instant or sorcery, I think with how the rules works, you just cast the spell with Krark and it fails. It just goes to your hand. So you kind of drew a card. You jump through a lot of hoops to draw a card. But Power Balance in like a stormy, low color red deck seems great. And you're already on Counterbalance too, right? Run both of those and top. Seems like a really clean fit. Possibility Storm, not a card I've seen a ton of recently, but can go pretty bonkers and really mess up everybody in the world. And then lands, we're on 28 with our MDFC. Tiny Pack Mana Base, which I think is more important now than ever with red decks because of our ability to copy a Tiny Pack, something like that, It's a lot easier now than Dualcaster Range. We can do it for free. And then, yeah, good blue-red Mana Base. Next up, we're looking at Omnath. What are we working with here? Usually going to see some creature combos. We're trying to blink our Omnath infinitely, draw our deck. Lots of Dorks, Dauntless Dismantlers. 2 of those we've seen so far. Duplicate, no Fimmage, just a duplicate, which is good because we can't do Fimmage Emil stuff because it dies. Doesn't work. Cutzel, Grand Abolisher, and Ranger Captain. Don't see Cutzel too much in some of these decks, but it is really nice. I think especially when you don't have black tutors to find the one of like the Grand Abolisher if that's what you want, or the Ranger Captain if that's what you want, or the Silence if that's what you want. Just doubling up on the effects is pretty nice. We're also on the Deadeye Navigator to go off with Dockside or Flesh Duplicate as a Dockside. Sorceries, Tutors, and Savine's Reclamation. Wargate, not that popular, but it shows up kind of specifically in these colors, like the Bruce Thras colors. I think we might be a Dryad Arbor deck, so you can also spend 3. We're not doing Green Suns, which I don't like. I mean, literally none of our combo pieces are green, so don't mind that. Instance, Final Showdown, which showed up this weekend for me, saved us from a Sisay. Pretty interesting card. Pretty cool little card that has a decent amount of utility. You save a creature, potentially turn off all creatures, blow up all creatures, all at instant speed. Interesting card in your white deck to think about. Another player opting to path over running Swords. Soul Partition showing up here. We can use it to double our Dockside and can be a temporary removal spell in a pinch. On the Intuition, we're going to be breaching more than likely. I mean, that's what we're in. Jeskai plus green. That's kind of what we can do. Are we on Ephemerate? Yeah, so we're on Ephemerate, so we do have that Spellseeker line. This combo has become not that popular, but we can also just Ephemerate our Dockside, whatever. Ephemerate Spellseeker without doing the combo line. We have other things we can do with it. Artifacts, just some mana and Aether Vial, which I really like. Makes it really hard to interact with some of our stuff we might want to do. One ring showing up here. Decent amount of enchantments. Blind Obedience, Breach, Rhystic. Song of Creation is the most goated. It doesn't really look like a Song of Creation deck. It doesn't look like we can just jam and cast a million spells a turn. You know, we don't have like the black rituals or the red rituals or whatever. But dang, a Song of Creation isn't awesome. And then Trouble Pair showing up as a value engine. And then 29 lands. We are on the Dryad Arbor, so we can do the thing where we use that, where we keep flickering the Dryad Arbor to get through our Omnath. Basically deal 4 to everyone and then flicker Omnath again, deal 4. Pretty cool. And no Surveillance. We're on the Spire of Industry with 11 artifacts. Nothing else especially standing out here. Esika Bop Farm, the upgraded precon. This is a cool deck. I gotta talk to the pilot of this list because when you first look at it, it's probably not exactly what you think it is. And what it really is a turbo 5-color deck that uses Esika just as a fierce SWAT enabler that happens to be a mana dork and gives you access to all 5 colors. So it's basically Najeela, but without making that Najeela game plan part of your list and just going pure clean 5-color best cards. So as you can see, we got a bunch of mana dorks, Tinderwall, literally just like this would be Najeela plus Najeela would be running like Derevi, Grim Hireling, blah, blah, blah. But this is just like the clean must run cards that don't combo. Sorceries, see kind of the same thing. The best 5-color cards that show up in those decks. We are relatively low on the creature count, so Diabolic Intent, you got to think about it. But like, I mean, this is like TNK runs like 11, 12 creatures and they do this. And also, again, we have a creature that's basically commander that's here just as a mana dork. So at some point you just sack it to an intent, whatever. Instance, also on the Culling of the Week, again, lowish creature count. We got the Crop Rotation. I think this is for E-Zone. I don't imagine we're doing Cradle especially well. Consult, Free Interaction, The Silence, Born here, Final Fortune, Intuition, just 5-color good stuff. We still have the Eladamri's Call. Again, it's not going to be for our creature combos. It's going to be for our combos that include a creature. You know, that makes sense. Or again, instead, find a Grand Abolisher, untap Grand Abolisher, find Thoracle, find Dockside, whatever. But a card we're not going to run here that we might run in like Najeela is like Summoner's Pact. Like here, Summoner's Pact, yeah, I can get Spirit Guide or Tenderwall, which Najeela does use that card for sometimes, but without the flexibility of Derevi, Cutzel, whatever, we're not going to be doing that. Artifacts, we are on the One Ring. Of course, we're on that Ad Nauseam. I think I pointed that out. And Intuition. And then just Mana Rocks and Wishclaw. You know how these high color piles do. J-Lo just turns, you know, into a extra big mana dork. And then enchantments, a few more. So we've got Mystic, Rhystic, Breach, must runs, Necropotence. You'd expect to see in a deck trying to go pretty quick. And then if you didn't believe me before, we got Necrodominance as well. Like this is a deck that's really leaning into the 5-color Rogsai thing. They're just ignoring that combo aspect with their commander. And then Smothering Tithe to net some mana. This is the most like mid-rangey looking card, but again, you can also do the thing where you like sit on an early Esika and Smothering Tithe, almost like present yourself as something that you're not for your deck, and then just like boom, Necrodominance, Born Upon a Wind win. We do have the E-Zone, yeah, no Cradle, yeah, just 5-color mana base with E-Zone as the only real utility land. Not even opting to run Otawara, it looks like, so just running the most efficient. Yeah, really cool deck. I was really excited to see this one. Next up, we're looking at a Tivit with Tezzeret the Seeker and Teferi. Love Tezzeret. Dothi Voidwalker. For some reason, I first saw this art and thought this was a Death Shadow, and I was like, dude, this is the most base deck I've ever seen. But yeah, Dothi, Esper, Drannith showing up here. You can already see like versus the SCG Con Vegas meta game, if you saw that, how I don't think there was a single Drannith in top 16 despite many decks that would normally run it. Here we've got like Drannith in every single deck that can run it, it looks like. Good stuffy cards. Kitten is usually here, and Tivit, it's really great. Grand Arbiter shows up in the most control-y of Tivits. It's not much of a staple. It's probably on like 10 to 20% of Tivit decks or something like that. Urza can show up about the same rate. And then Shieldred, I've seen experimented with. This is just one of those cards that is so grind exclusive that it's hard to evaluate for me, where when you get into the games where it's good, it warps the game around itself. And Tivit is trying to force those games, right? When you see Grand Arbiter and, you know, Dothi and Drannith, like you want to force those games. Sorceries, we've got Dam and Deluge, so doubling up on the board wipe so far. And then running Windfall, no Twister. Usually they'll opt for Twister because they don't really use the graveyard other than Savine's Wreck on Time Civ. So a lot of them will run Twister, and then like a decent amount of them will run like Grafdigger's Cage, we'll see. Instance, lots of free and cheap interaction. Strict Serenade showing up here. This is like a strict Serenade type of deck, right? Dovin's Veto, Delay, like really leaning into tons of interaction. Muddle the Mixture as a counterspell, it also gets your Time Civ. Tutor's interaction, we're not an Ad Nauseam deck, didn't really expect to see it. Artifacts, we are on the Cage, Curse Totem as well, Imposter Mech, Great Clone, Time Civ, One Ring, Wishclaw Talisman, Blind Obedience, keeping people slowed down, Touch the Spirit Realm, decent piece of interaction, Smothering Tithe, just a mid-rangey Esper kind of card. 28 lands. We are on the Cavern of Souls, naming Rogue, usually. Forbidden Orchard. We're running a couple basics here. Snow-covered plains, snow-covered swamp. Not really able to take advantage of them, but we did see a bunch of Path to Exiles earlier, right? So like heads up meta call there. Then we've got another Kenrith deck. Looks like we are seeing the Agatha. We're seeing another Dauntless, Drannith, another person playing the Evolution Witness, Hutzel here. Selvala also showing up. Not a card you see a ton of in Kenrith. I mean, if Kenrith is coming down, it does make 4 mana basically, and mana filters you. 6 showing up as well. I wonder if we're doing Life from the Loam because we got like Luris, Evolution Witness. Looks like we're packing like tons of loopy graveyard combos. Curious if we're gonna do that as well. 6 is just good though. 6 is just, if you're doing a mid-range grind thing, it's good. If you're doing a combo from the graveyard thing, it's good. Between it and Luris and 6, we have lots of ability to cast from our graveyard. Tutors and a Savine's Wreck. Also an Entomb Enjoyer. No Reanimate here, which I don't really expect to see. Swords, Overpath, Eladamri's Call, Brain Freeze. Again, no Nas. Really grindy looking top 16 so far, and that's kind of how it played out. Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Enchantments, we do have the Chthonian Nightmare, which is one I was looking for in the previous one. Another way to loop Dockside from the graveyard. And if it gets destroyed, you have lots of ways to buy it back in this deck, right? You have the Luris to recast it. You have 6 to recast it. So you have like a lot of potential to just refire on some of these graveyard loops that you can do. Probably the fittest to get some of the stuff in the yard as well as tutoring while you're at it. And then we are a Breach deck, of course. 28 lands, rocking the Cradle. Shifting Woodland showing up as well. Pretty sick. If you're like a Survival of the Fittest deck, just discard a thing, turn your land into that thing real quick. Pretty nice. Next up, we got Najeela, inspired by Coach Memo. Got a whole bunch of mana dorks, Halfling, the Hierarchs, Bird Shaman, Ragvan, that counts, Drevi. Kind of looking like the staples of Najeela for the creatures. Grim Hireling and the Derevi for your Najeela combos. Simlet and Kutzel, like the warriors that are good in the deck. Not doing the War and Soul Trader thing, which I have already seen a little bit. We saw that in the SCG Vegas video. Sorceries were on the Green Sun Zenith. I think Memo was trying in like the Cradle mid-rangier list. Here it can get Dorks, Tinderwall, Derevi, Kutzel, Simlet. I mean, that's still a good bit of variety. On the Summoner's Pact, we are on the Nas. Yeah, most of what I expect from Najeela. Only on the 1 Red Blast. Looks all up to code. Artifacts, no Ring is on Wishclaw and a bunch of rocks. Enchantments, we're on the Druid's Repository as another way to win. And then, of course, Breach, Mystic, Rhystic, must runs. 28 lands, duels, fetches. We are on the City of Traders, which doesn't always show up. Clean Najeela list. No new cards that I spotted at all. Just looks like the kind of clean, optimized Najeela deck that they were running like pre-MH3. With like some of the Green Sun Zenith, like some of that like mid-rangier, the stuff that most transfers from the mid-rangey builds being brought to here, I think. All right, we are halfway through the top 16, so we're going to take a look at a patron submitted deck list. Remember that this is a perk you can get over on the Patreon. Check that out in the description below if you're interested. And we're looking at Trunix, Asmarana, Martika Dice, and a Kuldakar combo deck. This is a pretty interesting build. Now, Trunic messaged me and said that he was iffy on showing this, whether it was he considered it a tournament deck or worth the content, but I want to talk about it because it's a pretty interesting build. He put a lot of work into the primer. If you're interested in this list, the link's going to be in the description below, and there's a pretty extensive primer for you to look at. It goes over the combo lines, potential ways to win, general strategy, stuff like that. In terms of like Asmo-focused combos, I will go over a couple of those because that is kind of a centerpiece of having Asmo in the zone, right? One of the combos being Asmo, Manufacturer, Nuka-Cola, needing 2 foods to start, activate Asmo, Coca-Cola machine will trigger, then Academy Manufacturer. You guys kind of know how the manufacturer lines work out. You're going to get a whole bunch of make extras. You'll make 2 food, 2 clues, 2 treasures, crack the food, keep it going. We also have grinding station loops that we can do, of course, being able to do them with the foods and clues and stuff, but as well as being able to do just pure Underworld Breach stuff. You can do Dockside Chthonian Nightmare with Disciple of the Vault, pure old Breach grinding station. We're on Citadel top. As long as you've discarded a card this turn, you can pay Hybrid Rakdos to cast it. When Asmarana, Martika Dice, and a Kuldakar enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a card named Underworld Cookbook, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. And then you can sack 2 food, target creature deals 6 damage to itself. Underworld Cookbook, artifact that costs 1, tap, discard a card, create a food. That's the main mode we're going to do, but we can also sacrifice it, return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. This is going to enable us to set up those food-based manufacturer combos. We're also a Nas deck and a Bolus Citadel deck, which you know I love both of those cards. Welder and Engineer, usually a package in a deck like this. We have artifact combos we assemble, right? We can engineer and find the Academy Manufactor. They were on Cloudstone Curio, but are currently testing the list without it. But if you're running Cloudstone Curio, you can run that as well. well. We got other things to kind of loop and kill people, right? Mayhem Devil, Reckless Fireweaver. Crime Novelist is a cool one. When you sack an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it and add a red. Party Thrasher's a new one. It's 2 mana, non-creature spells you cast from exile have Convoke. In your pre-combat main phase, you can discard a card. If you do, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. Kind of similar to Chainer. It's going to let you discard and cast a creature spell from a graveyard this turn. Dark Confidant, kind of showing its age here in CEDH. I don't know that there's a better option for a value engine-y creature in Rakdos right now. I'd probably have to look. Doffy comes to mind, but we're already on that. Duretti's also going to be great for kind of these artifact and somewhat discard-centric combo decks. Sorceries, a bunch of tutors. Reckless Handling, I know we're really looking for specific artifacts. I don't know if we have to dig this deep. I might play Diabolic Intent over it, even though we don't have a ton of creatures in play. That's just such a powerful card. On the Wheel of Fortune and Misfortune, Instance, whole bunch of mana, the best Rakdos interaction. Cool cards like Firestorm, which lets you discard a bunch of cards at once, potentially get rid of Hate Bears. It might be messing with you. Lightning Axe, another way. This is like something you see some of the Mardu lists run, the Mardu Reanimator decks. Works over here in Rakdos too. Get something in your graveyard, pitch Bolus of Citadel, and then Goblin Engineer into play with Lightning Axe still in the stack. We got the Tainted Pact, Flare of Duplication, new amazing card. Baleful Mastery is a cool one that's can be cutesy for what a lot of people run it for, which is the have an opponent draw a card when you play it for cheaper. I think that's like a really, really small upside. You just run this card if you really want another bit of removal, like exile-based removal is actually pretty decent. Can be a little rough on your ad nauseum, but I think our numbers are already going to be pretty good. Low Fire Covenant. Artifacts. Decent amount of these, right? We're on the Ring, Citadel, bunch of mana rocks. We're on the Sensei Stop for Citadel, and just in general, Sensei Stop, pretty good card. Crisp Bear in general, just really good card right now. Power Balance, a card that makes a lot of sense if you're already a Rakdos combo-y deck. I mean, this, for one of those Rakdos decks, has actually a decent amount of hits that you would want to hit off of it. We have, you know, a couple rituals, but like lots of permanents that if we hit, we basically cast almost any of these, any of our enchantments, any of our artifacts. Thony Nightmare, they said they were testing that over Cloudstone Curio. For the most part, I think that is better. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is a sick card that I think about in so many decks, and I still haven't tested it, but it seems like it wouldn't quite get there, but I could see it being pretty good actually. And then 28 lands. Forgotten Cave, the cycling lands work with our commander, right? And then some newer cards like Fomori Vault, which looks really good in these lower color lists. Skyreach Sanitarium helps us enable our commander. Again, if you're interested in it, it's gonna be in the description below. Check it out, read the primer. If you're interested in getting your deck submitted, check out the Patreon. Then we've got our third and last Kenrith, another Agatha the Vile Cauldron Enjoyer. Biomancer's Familiar also showing up, so doubling up on that cost reduction of abilities. Bloom Tender, Incubation Druid. This is one that kind of comes in and out of Kenrith's. Evolution Witness, again, that actually might come up by Biomancer's Familiar with Evolution Witness to spend a green. It's actually cheaper. I guess they come up with Kenrith too, but even without Kenrith, you can do it. Archon of Emeria showing up here. Not a card we see a ton of in Kenrith, but Kenrith a deck that's pretty resilient to stack, so slotting in a little bit of that makes sense. And we got Zerda as well. It looks like we're just trying to really break our activated abilities of creatures, you know, between Agatha, Biomancer, Incubation Druid, Kenrith itself. Zerda makes them cheaper. It can make our Dockside Emil combo work better. Pretty much all our combos. And then we have some bigger stuff here. We've got the Italian as a draw engine, which has been showing up a bit more at this event. Overcharged Amalgam is a cool one. It's a flash flyer with exploit, and when it exploits, you counter target spell activated ability or triggered ability. So this lets you, in a cool way, like while you're looping, have a reusable counter spell potentially. The point where they might be trying to interact with stuff is kind of tough, but like, especially if you're casting something or you have like a trigger on the stack to get the Dockside out of there, could come up like that. And then again, just straight up is just a counter spell that you can have it enter, sack itself, bring it back at some point, have it sack your Dockside, whatever. Just a cool card. And then Seedborn Muse leans into the idea of what I was saying, that we're maybe just actually leaning into using these creatures in a value kind of way and just using Kenrith to draw cards, give us some advantage, and then Consphinx, big ol' advantage engine, takes over a game. We got 2 tutors, Meme Bet, and then a board wipe in Dam. Interaction, Assassin's Trophy, you hate to see it. Make it an Abrupt Decay. Good lord, get it out of here. I'd rather see a Soul Partition. Mask of the Mimic. This is one that gets talked about. This is probably one of the, whatever the list is of like cards that people talk about putting in their deck and they rarely do. I'd be curious to hear how this card performed, if they saw it or if they've played with it a while. We are, you know, in a format that is really warped around just a couple creatures, right? If you just have a 1-mana way to get a Dockside, get a Thoracle, whatever. So this deck not even running Thassa's Oracle, right? Yeah, doesn't look like it. Not even opting to do Thoracle. They're like really leaning it, especially like, I mean, if you have an Archon of Emeria, that makes sense, right? You're not reasonably going to be able to do your A+B casting stuff. We're probably not on Breach either. Lots of interaction, no Naws as expected. Soul Cauldron showing up, Grim Monolith, the Ring, and then let's see, no Breach. We didn't see Brain Freeze, none of that stuff. No LED. Stapley cards. Deafening Silence makes a lot of sense in this deck. I think those are the two best rule of laws you can run is Archon and Deafening Silence. Survival of the Fittest, you can see this in most Kenrith decks. Carpet of Flowers. Carpet is something I kept count of this weekend because it's a card I thought about bringing, and it didn't seem especially good. It's just such a pod dependent card. Like sometimes it's unbelievable. Tithe. Sylvan Library, going as deep as that for Draw Engine and 5 colors. And then Cryptolith Rite, which lets your creatures tap for 1 mana of any color. We're running a whole bunch of creatures. We're really doing the creature combo-y overlap thing. I mean, makes a lot of sense. And then 27 lands. So 3 relatively different approaches to Kenrith. I'd say this being the most different one that's like leaning into stacks more. Not a stacks deck, but is able to like kind of tempo around people and win through their own stacks pieces. So really cool stuff. Because I couldn't find my Kennen, we've got Tymna Kraum. 19 creatures. Right now, a lot of them are like 13, 12. So it's pretty different. Saracen showing up, not one we see a lot of, but has historically been a card that comes in and out of these decks. Archivist, Fairy Mastermind. These seeming a bit more popular recently. Duplicate, Amphimage, no Metamorph. Bergy, which is a good card, but can be a little weird in your like Delny, Sheoldred, Tymna Kraum deck. That is really creature heavy. Bergy really rewards you for casting lots of cheap spells. Sorceries, kind of the best ones. No Rite of Flame, notably. Swords, no Path. I really like running both in TNK. Cycryphs here, Ad Nauseum's here. We might have some tough Nauses, but I guess if we get like an early, like Sheoldred down, you know, it on average, its effect on your Nause is probably neutral because it's going to make it better when it's out. It's going to make it a little bit worse when it's not out. You know, the impact is probably negligible. The thing about creatures isn't always like, oh, look at all these 3-drops. It's often like, look at all these things that don't do anything after I Nause. Like, I don't want to play an Oppo or a Delny after I Nause. I do like Spear Guide and definitely don't like Sheoldred post Nause, but unless I have a million mana and a way to loop wheels or something. Artifacts were also on the One Ring, and then Roxen, Wishclaw. Doing the Necro as well, so really pulling from a lot of different places, right? We're doing like Saracen, Sheoldred stuff, maybe powering up our life total, almost like a like an Kraum kind of deal where we're powering up our life total with creature beats. And then also on the Trouble of Pairs and Smothering Tithe. I would probably run these 5 enchantments exactly in TNK right now. Trouble in Pairs I've yet to get any experience with, but I see the vision. Then 27 lands, we are on the Manamo. Greedy. Dockside Dar Farm, we've got Dargo Thras running the Invasion of Ikoria. Some of the better Dorks, Ragavan, Kennen. We are on the Bergy. Not all of them are, but you want some way to loop Dargo, and Bergy can be one of them. Tidespout Tyrant. If you're not familiar with Dargo list, you run this because Dargo costs 7, and you can Neoform or Birthing Pod into it from Tidespout Tyrant. Seedborn Muse. So similar cards like we saw in like the Rograkh I played, right? You know, they're not running like Trophy Mage, so they don't have so generically good ones, plus Life's Legacy, which is very good with Dargo. J-Will, which can be awkward in the deck depending on the construction. We are a Breach deck, so it's better. When you're doing like Wheel, J-Will, Bergy stuff, it can be good. The thing about this deck is it sometimes it's a Storm deck and sometimes it's a Thrasios deck. It's one of those decks where I probably without payoff in hand wouldn't want to tap out for J-Will, but it is a really powerful card, especially if I already have some big mana thing I want to use the mana for. And then Blasphemous Act as a board wipe. Instance, we got the Bolt, counterspells, going for Dispel, Noxious Revival, card we've seen less and less of, I feel like. We got the Brain Freeze, Born, Muddle as a tutor, Court of Calling, artifacts, bunch of rocks. We're on the Cloudstone Curio, we're doing that. I know that's not 100% standard, but with Dargo, a lot of times it's going to be like pretty cheap. The dockside count might only have to be 4 to loop once you start sacking some treasures. Birthing Pod for the stuff we mentioned, and just pretty good card. Enchantments, we're on the Greater Good, another reason to be playing Dargo in green. And then we're on the E-Zone, the Cradle. We were on Crop Rot, I'm sure, right? We're not on Crop Rot, so we're just hoping to raw hit into one of those. Pretty standard other stuff. And then we're looking at Yisan, not a deck you see a whole lot of. This is piloted by Jay, also known as Def Cat, a person I roomed with. Gave confidence to after beating him up in the prep games, which is a lot of fun to see him do really well after just wanting to swear off the deck over and over. Yeah, let's take a look at it. Yisan is a kind of a boomer deck, you know, it might be affectionately called. It's got some new tools because green's got new stuff, but if you're not aware of what the deck does, it can really get you by surprise because it's going to let you pretty deterministically, if you get it out early, you're going to go like turn 1 Yisan, some manner of untapper, like Aquarian Ranger. Turn 2, you can potentially double activate if you do an untap tap, especially if you have like a Guy's Cradle or something. Put in some kind of 2-drop that slows people down, like an oof. And then a lot of times you'll be able to go into your turn kind of saying like, hey, I need to be able to hold up Yisan for Manglehorn or some other interaction, like a Rex Sage. And then if you get to your turn, you just slam Dosen, and then you can just like double activate, get Temur Sabertooth, Ashaya, and then make infinite mana, get the creatures out of your deck, whatever, win any number of ways. So you're going to have ways to accelerate into early-ish Yisan. Walking Ballista is a win condition. Korean Ranger, like I said, is a combo piece. Magus of the Candelabra, we're a pretty dedicated Cradle deck. Staxy pieces are interactive pieces. You want to take advantage of Yisan's ability to, at instant speed, just go get something like a Cankerbloom or a Collector Oof or whatever. Then you have other outlet-y cards. Duskwatch Recruiter is going to let you get all the creatures out of your deck. Again, dose and shut people off quickly. Guardian Augmenter is going to be able to protect your commander. Endurance interaction. You can kind of see where we're going with some of these. Tiered Upper Hyrex Tower Scout untap is like a built-in untapper to get you up from 3 up to 4. And then some flexible cards. Last minute addition I gave to him was Disciple of Fraelis, which I know he said he got a win and a draw with. So that's kind of cool, where if you get infinite mana in any green deck, you're able to Disciple of Fraelis and draw your deck with just sacrificing your commander and recasting it. If like you have a way to bounce the Disciple. So like in this deck, Ashaya, Korean Ranger will let you return a creature. So, and then with it, if you have like infinite mana and like Temur Sabertooth, you can Disciple of Fraelis, bounce it, eat your commander over and over and draw. You'll go through your deck. We're not really looking to cast spells, but we have stuff to back us up and set us up. You know, Green Sun's Finale, Sylvan Scrying lets us go get Cradle. Instant stuff that's going to make us really hard to beat, like Legolas's quick reflexes, stuff to protect what we're trying to do, interaction if we need it, like Force of Vigor. Artifacts, not a ton. We're an oof deck, but we want to be able to accelerate into early stuff and have a lockout piece like Chalice. I think he was on Trinisphere. Maybe this list has changed since then. Other lock pieces like that might be something you want to run. Burgeoning can get you a bunch of lands into play. Concordic Crossroads, speed up everything you do. Exploration, Wild Growth. Kim's Transformation turns them into a 3/3. Then a bunch of lands, but a very clean mana base. We're just Cradle, a whole bunch of forests, Yavimaya, which is pretty impactful because we have lots of forest untappers. Lands that either make us more mana or have some kind of utility, but pretty much all just make us more mana other than Cavern of Souls. And then the top 4. Again, maybe don't put as much stock into the placement of this tournament, but 4 other decks, the top 16. Thras Vial. Deck I've kind of talked up recently. Oko makes me think we're not the all-in Necro-born Emergent Zone deck, but we'll see. Creatures, we got the Biomancer's Familiar. That's definitely looking more like a Thrasios gamer. Dockside with Temur. We got the Seedborn. Good stuff in these colors. Fimage, no duplicate. Cool thing with Temur is you can still combo with Fimage because Temur doesn't target, just returns a creature to your hand. Also, notably, people can't, if that ever comes up, people can't like swat your thing or they don't know what you're going to return with Sabertooth. 4 tutors for our sorceries. No Neoform, pretty notable. Instance. Interaction. We do have the crop rotation, Flusterstorm, Dispel. Dispel stock's been going up lately, it seems like. We're on the Abrupt Decay, a Veil of Summer. We're on the Born Upon a Wind. We're going like Mana Drain, Dramatic Reversal. I don't know if we're on Isoceptor, but maybe it comes up. Chord, no Ad Nauseam. I think we could afford with our numbers, but okay. Artifacts. Yeah, we're on the Isoceptor. So we're doing Iso Rev plus Basalt Cannon plus Temur Sabertooth. I didn't see a Brain Freeze. So no Breach, which I'm a little iffy on. That's like the whole reason, like why we're run this over Rog Thras if I'm not going to Underworld Breach you out with my Demonic Tutor. I guess you get Oracle Consult too. Sure, whatever. Carpet, Training Grounds. That's a Thrasios game right there if I ever seen one. We are on the Breach. Okay, yeah. So I think I had heard about this. Yeah, they're not on LED stuff. They're just Breach for value. Like Breach either help you push your combo through or just to be good and rebuy your stuff. I kind of feel like it's free enough in these colors at least to run Brain Freeze and LED. Just being able to DT for Breach and then just assemble everything out the yard. Basically, it's pretty worth it. But hey, did the thing here without it. And then 29 lands, no Cradle. We are on the E zone. There was no Necropotence, kind of as expected. Rejuvenating Springs. Do we even have OG duels? I don't even think we have OG duels. No, kind of there's a Trop Island and that's it. Yeah, so maybe some budget considerations for the dual lands too. That's cool. I've been seeing a little bit of that recently. I like it. I like the representation for the more budget-minded players. So yeah, cool take on Thras Vial. I think this deck and these colors have got new tools, even though I don't think they actually use any new cards here, but it's getting some upgrades out of MH3. All right, next up, we're looking at Tayam. A loved and hated deck. I think it's cool. If you don't know how Tayam works, it's got lots of lines, but basically it breaks things. Looks to run tons of permanents with mana value 3 or less so that it consistently can hit, and then it will start to loop cards where it has sacrifice effects to continually loop the same permanent out of the graveyard over and over, kill everybody with infinite mana and infinite counters, and run you through the trap from the dungeon or whatever, some other kind of way to kill you. Running Walking Ballista. So I haven't looked at a Tayam list in a little bit, but not a card I had seen in a lot of them. It is a way that you can, especially if you have it enter with a +1/+1 counter through some effect, and then are able to just put your infinite mana into it, you can still, without casting a spell, kill everybody from the graveyard. So that's kind of cool. You're going to see a lot of cards you haven't seen in other decks, like Acacia Money Changer, that are just there to do counter shenanigans. I'm mainly going to try to focus on newer cards because there's lots of overlapping. Like Tayam has like 80 billion possible combos. There's so many different ways. So I'm going to try to focus on that. Emperor of Bones is an MH3 card. You can come on your turn, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So it can be yours, can be someone else's. You can spend 1 and a black to adapt 2, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Seems very Tayam-y so far. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on it, put a creature card exiled with Emperor Bones onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. Gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. A finality counter means that if it leaves the battlefield, it's exiled. So you're not going to want to do this with something you want to loop, but you can use it on somebody else's thing from a yard potentially, or just as a way to pretty cheaply buy back something of your own. Agnostic of Tayam, it is another card you can put counters on it, and it triggers not when you adapt it like a lot of those other cards, when you put the counters on it. I'm not sure if there's like a new loop with it, what it exactly interacts with, but it does lots of Tayam-y things. You can kind of see that at least, right? Waller Roots, one of the goats of this deck. White Plume Adventure, kind of the outlet I was talking about, lets you go take the initiative over and over. Colonel Autumn, a new card, gives all your legends exploit. When a creature you control exploits, you put a counter on each creature you control. So get a legend into play, it exploits something, put a counter on everybody. It kind of set up a loop where now any legend you buy back can get something else in the yard. So if you're able to put multiple legends into play, you can kind of see where this is going. Brina, which is just the card I'm most famous for, so I got to highlight it here. Aven Interrupter, another newer card. When it enters, you exile a spell. So it is a counter spell on a stick that Tayam can put into play. They're able to recast the spell, but not the turn they play it because of how plot works. And then Staxy effects, countery stuff. Again, can't go over every single Tayam creature and all its interactions. Sorceries, we're not going to run a lot. We're running mostly permanents. We got the Green Sun Zenith, Crop Rot. We're a pretty dedicated Cradle deck, though we have some other utility lands that we might go to get. Archer Charm lines up with that as well. A few tutors in removal. We can't run a lot, remember. Artifacts, Agatha's Soul Cauldron. We're just built to break this. We're also a pretty broken LED deck because we can use this, discard a thing, use the mana, activate Tayam, put that thing straight into play at instant speed. Ashnod's Altar, we making mana, we sacking things. Birthing Pod, not a card we can flip into. We don't run a lot that we can't flip into, but it does have a ton of utility at being able to like turn any 2-drop into any 3-drop, especially when our mana values are so condensed around 1, 2s, and 3s. Enchantments. Some of these we can do some goofy stuff with. Not seeing any new ones. I know some people were talking about, I think Vraska joins up. Insidious Roots being the newest one here. We got another Earthcraft Enjoyer. Love to see it. Lands. So we got a decent amount of utility. We got Centaur Garden, which can let us do some stuff, I think, with Devoted Druid mainly. I'm sure they're still on Devoted Druid, right? You give it +3/+3 till end of turn, so you're able to tap and untap it, and it won't ever die before you remove the Tayam counters. You're basically net mana and remove the counters with Tayam, and you'll be able to keep using the Druid. We really like Cradle with like Sylvan Safekeeper because we can potentially loop the Cradle by tapping it for a bunch of mana, sacrificing it, returning it to play with Tayam. Gavany Township, way to put a bunch of counters on things and get people killed. Phyrexian Tower. Shifting Woodland lines up pretty well with what Tayam does, right? Literally just turn this into a permanent from your yard. We got tons of those. Urza's Cave. Let's just go get one of these utility lands. Talon Gates of Madara is a new one of those utility lands that also lets us at instant speed without casting a spell interact by just spend 4 mana, boop, Talon Gates into play from my hand. Target creatures phased out. Here we got Citrus rocking T and K. Super cool, dude. Creatures. On the Delny, on the Archivist, these are the main notable ones. There's no Drannith Magistrate, no Fairy Mastermind, none of that. We are on the one wheel. We are on the Reanimate. No board wipe in the Sorceries. I think he had said he had just taken out Toxic Deluge, Tutors, Mean Bet, Rite of Flame, other TNK stuff. Instance. We're on the Path and the Swords. I like it. Strict Serenade, Control Gamer. We're on the Final Fortune and the Born. No Culling the Weak. We're on the Dispel, so again, pretty popular. Of course, we're on the Nas, Intuition. First deck we've seen, I think, unless I really haven't been paying attention, on Vexing Bauble, which I know he said was really, really good, and when played against him was really, really good, and is annoying to deal with. That's all it's literally the only data I have with it is this player's account of it. I never got to play it, but being able to deploy something that shuts off free interaction, except when you want free interaction to be online, pretty sick. No One Ring, we're on the Wishclaw. Worse. And then we are a Tithe Gamer, no Necropotence. Not the most proactively slanting TNK. I mean, Vexing Bauble kind of is, kind of isn't. That's kind of the utility of this card. But seeing like a Strict Serenade and Tithe, no Necro, like we're not doing like the Necro jamming kind of TNK. 27 lands, nothing else new other than the bauble, it looks like. Doesn't seem like TNK got a lot out of this set, so I don't expect them to. You might see a couple play like a Static Prison and Vexing Bauble, but we'll see if anything else ends up being playable for him. And then the last deck we're gonna be looking at is Godo, Bandit Warlord. Didn't really think of the set in terms of what Godo got for it, but I know there are some red cards that especially for lower color decks might be playable, so let's take a look. Lots of ways to net mana. We've got the Goblin, we got the Trilobite, we've got ways to get artifacts in and out of play. Fury, Magus, kind of reactive stuff. Anya's Ravager, not one I see all the time. Can be really nice to kind of filter through your deck. Wandering Archaic, cool option if you're going to sit on like a hand where you, especially if you can't like power out Godo, or like this can kind of be like a little bit of a Grand Abolisher. It works a little bit worse for creature combos because being able to like copy Swords to Plowshares targeting your Godo doesn't help you at all. Like it can help you stay alive through the next turn, but versus like copying the counter spell that's trying to counter Godo, it's a lot different. Sorceries, we do got the multi-duplication. Warrior's Oath showing up here. I know we saw lots of Warrior's Oaths and Last Chances at SCG Con Vegas. Regular Wheel of Fortune, J-Will, Heat Shimmer. And we are doing dual caster stuff as an alternate win con. Instance, regular old Bolt, Magnetic Theft, Return the Favor, another cool card for like low color red decks. Chaos Warp on my Birds of Paradise. So removal, interaction, the best we can muster up in mono red basically. Starstorm's the cool one. X damage to each creature. Valuing the wipes here. Ghostfire Slice. I think the first MH3 card we've seen here. But Ghostfire Slice gonna be online a decent amount of the time. Deal 4 to any target. Artifacts. Tons of mana. Another Vexing Bauble Enjoyer. Got the Flail, Sting. Lots of like utility sort of equipment to be able to tutor for. Transfer to lock people out. Staff of Completion. Argentum Armor. Yeah, ways to protect our stuff. Other things to get. Nothing super standing out. Not sure how popular Ruby Medallion is actually, but the Bauble, of course, standing out as a newer card. Enchantments, just Blood Moon. Blood Moon, I saw not help a lot recently when it's been cast. Seen a lot of people at Jessica's Will and Dockside after a Blood Moon. Not a card I'm super high on, but when your interaction is as limited as it is in mono red, probably worth a slot. Deploy with caution at least. Lands that can make us extra mana, utility stuff to buy back our commander. Urza's Cave, kind of an interesting one. I guess when you're running enough of these utility stuff, it becomes better. Like when you're running Talon Gates, it's kind of hot. Being able to just instep, cave, phase out like a Drannith Magistrate and then go off. Pretty sick. I would not be surprised to see Talon Gate see more and more play, especially with that mana filtering ability of it. Pretty interesting one. Let me know down below what you think of this event. Which of these deck lists was your favorite? What do you think the impact of MH3 is going to be on this format? I would say this one versus the last top 16. We saw more decks without any changes. Maybe just didn't have the cards day of, didn't know what to run, etc. Let me know if you liked me talking about Rog Thras or the deck I ran in my experience of the tournament. You know, the breakdowns we did like on the podcast of events don't tend to do well, so I assume you guys don't like that kind of stuff, but I don't know unless you let me know. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, go play CEDH. Have a good one, everybody.